drinking water. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First in our news, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has affirmed that the unprecedented succession of crises and conflicts in the world require that the international community addresses more than ever before the issue of reform of the UN Security Council with the greatest diligence, calling for redressing the historical injustice done to the African continent. In his speech read on his behalf Friday in Oyala, Equatorial Guinea, by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, during the 5th summit of the Group of 10 of the African Union on the Security Council reform, President Tebboune indicated that this summit is being held in an international and regional context full of challenges and risks, against the backdrop of a severe crisis which has struck the collective security system, especially since the United Nations Security Council was recently hit by almost complete paralysis. President Tebboune evoked the crisis which prevails in the African continent, particularly in the Sahel-Saharan region, which is suffering from the scourges of terrorism, organized crime, and the spread of tension hotbeds and instability, in addition to the great tragedy that the Palestinians are experiencing, and which is taken an alarming proportion day after day due to the incapacity of the UN to stop the crimes of the Zionist occupier and its violations of the rules of international law, which itself decides on. The head of state underlined that the issue of reform is no longer limited to the increase in the number of members from emerging countries led by Africa, but goes well beyond, because the sustainability of the multipolar international organization is now put to the test, given the scale of the logic of the power balance, the phenomenon of polarization, and the criteria of selectivity and discrimination in terms of the imperative respect for the rules of international law.
Today, the challenge of reforming the Security Council shouldn't be limited only to acquiring more representativeness of developing countries, including African countries. It should target other gains, because the continuity of the international multilateral system with its structures is seriously undermined by unbalanced powers, a word subject to polarization, but also a double standard policy in respecting international law.
You were listening to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, speaking on behalf of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune. President Tebboune also affirmed that Algeria will work during this or its next mandate in the Security Council in coordination with its African brothers in the republics of Sierra Leone and Mozambique to make the voice of Africa heard within the central body, but also to defend the concerns, interests and aspirations of African countries united under the banner of the African Union in order to guarantee effectiveness, efficiency and influence in the defense of just causes and common interests. Let's listen to the Minister of Foreign Affairs again.
Algeria continues its efforts aimed at strengthening its presence within international organizations and defends the priorities of its children, both inside and outside the country. All the merit goes to the President of the Republic, who undertook structural changes for the handling of the national community settled abroad, hence meeting the concerns, aspirations and ambitions.
For the President of the Republic, the unified position of the African continent should affirm the imperative to develop an approach which allows the central UN body to protect itself from tensions and polarization, and to focus more on the role it should play and responsibilities it should assume in line with UN Charter.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has been received in his capacity as a representative of the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, in Equatorial Guinea by the President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Julius Maada Bio, and coordinator of the Committee of the 10 of the African Union, outside of the African Summit meeting on the reform of the Security Council. On this occasion, Mr. Attaf extended to the President of Sierra Leone the greetings of President Tebboune and expressed his wish to maintain work together to strengthen the relations between the two countries on all levels, who both will represent the African continent as non-permanent members of the Security Council as from January 1st. During the meetings, the two officials examined the development achieved as part of the Security Council reform, as well as the last developments of the situation in the Sahel-Sahara region, notably the political and constitutional crisis in Niger. The Chamber of Lords, organized by the Algeria British Business Council ABBC during its annual meeting under the patronage of the President of the Arab British Chamber of Commerce, Baroness Simons, considered a friend of Algeria. Beside the ambassadors of Algeria in London, Mr. Noordin Yazid, and of the United Kingdom in Algeria, Mrs. Sharon Wood, several companies, managers and economic operators were present at the meeting. Addressing the meeting, the president of the ABBC, Mrs. Olga Maitland, stressed the importance of her country's contribution to Algeria's economy, notably in the instilling of the English language in the Algerian educational system. Algeria's ambassador, for his part, Mr. Noordin Yazid, stressed that the determination of the Algerian government to build a strong, dynamic, resilient and diverse economy and to facilitate, attract and promote British investments in Algeria.
To the Middle East now, where 200 lorries laden with aid have entered the Gaza Strip on the second day of the truce informed in the Palestinian enclave. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, it was the major humanitarian convoy to enter Gaza since the Israeli army launched its military operations 7 weeks ago. In a statement to the press, the UN agency affirmed that hundreds of thousands of people had been provided with food, water, and medical supplies. The UN humanitarian teams and their partners would intensify their humanitarian operations in the forthcoming days to meet the needs of the population in the Gaza Strip. The UN envoy to the Middle East, Tor Wensland, hailed the beginning of the implementation of the hoped the humanitarian ceasefire would be extended. The 4-day truce reached under the mediation undertaken by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. 42 Palestinian prisoners were due to be released today in return for the release of 14 Israeli hostages. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Foreign Minister, Riyad al-Maliki, stressed the necessity to pull efforts to put an end to Israel's attacks on Gaza. During a meeting in Ramallah with his Portuguese and Slovenian counterparts, he warned against an escalation of the attacks and crimes perpetrated by the Israeli army and by the Jewish settlers in the West Bank, including East al-Quds. This came as the Israeli occupying forces today arrested several Palestinians following incidents that erupted in various parts of the Palestinian territory.
The temporary humanitarian truce has revealed the extent of the humanitarian catastrophe and the massive destruction caused by the Israeli attacks on Gaza. During a press conference held at UNRWA headquarters in occupied Jerusalem, UNRWA Commissioner General Philippe Lazzarini addressed the conditions the Palestinian refugees and humanitarian aid are facing. The humanitarian agencies hope to intensify the delivery of aid in the besieged enclave, as highlighted by the UNRWA Commissioner General, who stressed that 200 lorries would be on each of the 4-day truce allowed to enter Gaza. The UNRWA warned against the epidemics, underlining that the shortage of food, fuel, drinking water and medicine worsened these last weeks.
Skin disease and diarrhea have exponentially increased as a result of unsanitary conditions made much worse by the rain. In some places, the rate of disease are 45 times more than it was in previous year. Like I said before, it's only a matter of time before people in Gaza start dying due to the siege and the lack of basic, not just because of the bombardment.
UNRWA estimated that 1.7 million people have been displaced in Gaza, including 1 million who sought refuge in facilities of the UNRWA.
We meet also today at a very somber milestone, as UNRWA records more than 1 million people now sheltering in our facilities across the Gaza Strip. This is more than half of the total number of people displaced. They live in over 150 UNRWA schools and buildings. Gaza is certainly one of the very few places in the world where the United Nations opens its premises to host people forced to leave their homes.
That was UNRWA Commissioner General Felipe Lazzarini.
And with this last piece of news, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for our weekly program, starting with a special program devoted to the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Children. It will be followed by another program by my colleague Aziz Agassi. As for me and my colleague, we'll be meeting you tomorrow as part of a new news bulletin in English. Until then, stay tuned to Radio Algeria International, and bye-bye for now. Violence against women and girls remains one of the most prevalent and pervasive human rights violations in the world. Globally, an estimated 736 million women, almost 1 in 3, have been subjected to physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or both at least once in their life. This scourge has intensified in different settings, including the workplace and online spaces, and has been exacerbated by post-pandemic effects, conflicts, and climate change. The solution lies in robust responses, including investment in prevention. However, alarmingly, data on how much nations are committing to counterattack violence against women and girls remains glaringly sparse. For instance, just 5% of government aid is focused on tackling violence against women and girls, and less than 0.2% is directed to its prevention. The 2023 campaign Invest to Prevent Violence Against Women and Girls will call on citizens to show how much they care about ending violence against women and girls, and call on governments worldwide to share how they are investing in gender-based violence prevention. Violence against women and girls remains largely unreported due to the impunity, silence, stigma, and shame surrounding it. Violence against women continues to be an obstacle to achieving equality, development, peace, as well as to the fulfillment of women and girls' human rights. All in all, the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals to leave no one behind cannot be fulfilled without putting an end to violence against women and girls. In a video message for the official United Nations commemoration event of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls in New York, the UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed said halfway through the 2030 agenda, we are far from achieving the target of eliminating violence against women and girls.
The rates of violence against women are alarmingly high and further aggravated by conflicts, crises, and emergencies. And the protracted global backlash against gender equality is threatening to undo decades of hard-won gains. Women's rights defenders and activists are facing more risks than ever before, including in the digital sphere. Halfway through the 2030 agenda, we are far from achieving the target of eliminating violence against women and girls. It transcends borders and cultures. This year's commemoration calls for the special attention to prevention. Investment in prevention is to invest in our collective well-being. It means creating conditions where women and girls can thrive, unburdened by the fear of violence. It means addressing both root causes and drivers of violence, challenging discriminatory norms and practices. We must act now for a better and safer future for all women and girls and for everyone. Each of us has a vital role. The UN family, development partners, civil society and the private sector to step up our efforts in preventing and ending violence against women and girls. Let's turn our shared commitment into concrete action. And together, let's build a future where every woman and girl live free from violence. Thank you.
For his part, the chairman of the 78th session of the General Assembly, Dennis Francis, underlined during the event commemorating International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women that violence against women and girls remains one of the most prevalent and pervasive human rights violations in the world.
Violence against women is one of the most pervasive and pernicious human rights violations around the world. A devastating experience visited upon 1 in every 3 women. Who are these women whose dignity and rights we men so whimsically deny and treat dishonorably? in some situations, as if they are mere possessions, inanimate, and so easily replaceable. They are our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, our beloved granddaughters, our cherished loved ones, the overwhelming majority of whom guide, nurture, and support us as we advance, sometimes with great success, that commands the admiration and respect of the community through our lives. We know that investments are crucial for the advancement of gender equality, and yet global investments to prevent gender-based violence are still far too low. Aside from being a flagrant violation of their human rights, violence against women results in significant costs that are borne by everyone, most prominently by the victims and survivors themselves, but also to communities, governments, employers, and the society at large. Everyone, everywhere, therefore has a role, and indeed a responsibility, to repudiate this abuse and to commit to working to prevent it. For their part, governments have a multidimensional duty to take robust measures to prevent violence and to protect women from it, among other things, by enforcing laws, allocating adequate resources through gender-sensitive budgeting, and fostering strategic partnerships, especially with the private sector, to fill the funding gaps which impede effective interventions.
This year's International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls comes amid the Zionist barbaric killings and abuses committed on Palestinian women and girls, notably the women and girls of Gaza. For this, we have with us Ms. Sumaya Bashir, a Palestinian student in public international law here in Algeria. UN Women said that 2 Palestinian women are killed every hour and 7 women every 2 hours. It's a horrible figure. What can you say about this?
Actually, the Israeli occupation is used to practicing indiscriminate killing upon the Palestinian, not only women. Every Palestinian human is exposed to killing, to arrest, to targeting. We're talking here about children, about women. Actually, women is deprived from their rights, their basic rights.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're deprived from their homes. They've been subjected to.
Yeah, masculines, I guess, yeah. Masculines, they are targeted by the Zionist occupier.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we know that in war times, usually the women and children are spared, but the Zionist occupier is not sparing any women or any kid or any child. My second question is the international community, which is turning a blind eye to the sufferings of Palestinian women and girls while advocating for the rights of women and girls internationally. How can you explain this double standard policy?
Yeah, as we all can see that the international inaction is going so far. The inability to implementing the international conventions, specifically Human Rights Convention. Now I'm talking about Women's Rights Convention, or 1979, these conventions, and also the international humanitarian law.
Yeah, exactly.
And as we all can see, the lack of the United Nations to take a real action to stop these violations, these Israeli violations.
So the UN Women Agency said that many women, pregnant women in particular, are given birth in appalling conditions, sometimes undergoing cesarean section without anesthesia and other basic medical equipment. How is this bearable for any human being in the 21st century?
Yeah, as for pregnant women, they really have actually suffering from harsh conditions. Many of these women, like you said, give birth to a cesarean without anesthesia. many of them had their uteruses removed because the lack of the because of the lack of the capabilities to stop the bleeding. So the psychological and physical pain they suffer from cannot be describable, actually.
My following question is, how is the truce likely to ease or to alleviate the sufferings of Palestinian women and girls in the occupied Gaza Strip in particular?
Okay, the truth will give them a chance to understand what they suffer from, or what already happened, or what they lost. But actually, or certainly will not alleviate their pain or console their pain. However, we hope to reach to a permanent ceasefire. Maybe it would be an outlet for them. I wish that.
Yeah, we all wish that. And my last question for you is, what's your message to the Palestinian women and girls and to the world leaders who can act to put an end to this barbaric aggression committed by the Zionist occupier against the defenseless Palestinians?
My message is absolutely that there is no woman should suffer from any form of violence, and the international treaties and conventions all must be strictly applied to ensure that this will be achieved.
It's worth recalling that the Palestinian death toll from Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip has soared to almost 15,000, the government media office in the blockaded enclave said. The victims include 6,150 children and over 4,000 women, while more than 36,000 people have been injured. Around 7,000 people remain unaccounted for, including more than 4,700 children, the media office indicated.
Hello and welcome to this program devoted to the wonderful Sahara Desert of Algeria.